Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. Hope everyone is doing well. Happy Friday. Maybe it's Saturday for you. Thanks for being here. I'm just getting things set up. Let me pull out the chat so I can see what you guys are saying. And I'm assuming you can hear me this time. But if not, hey, that's okay. Thanks for being here. This was a little bit of a last minute live stream, as always, impromptu. And we are going to talk Bitcoin. We're going to talk the broader market. You know, there's been some, not today mostly, but over the last couple of days, couple of weeks, you know, the broader markets have just felt like there's something brewing underneath the surface, you know, and we've been talking about it a little bit in the Slack group in terms of, you know, currency crisis and financial crisis and all that stuff. But you know, I'm gonna share some thoughts on that. What does that mean for Bitcoin? What does that mean for, you know, for other markets and recessions and all that? And so I'll share my thoughts on that. And of course, we will take a look at the charts here. So let me see here. I'm assuming. Give me 1 second here. All right, here we go. I'm looking at the chat. I'm gonna post something in the chat here. Here we go. Looks like the chat's okay there. All right, hello from New York. Looks like that's the problem here. Hold on. Ever since YouTube switched their thing here, and I had to switch my streaming software, I have had some technical difficulties, as you might have noticed. As you might have noticed. All right, it sounds like I'm getting the thumbs up. Looks like we're good. All right, you know, it's really weird. I got 2 chat rooms up, and one looks like it's up. The other one, I'm not seeing the comments here. We'll get started here shortly. Sorry, guys. All right, looks like there's some people that joined the link that I sent out. That is a problem. Oh man. Okay. Well, you guys are here. Hopefully that other one fixes itself. Apologize for those of you that were waiting on the other stream. Not sure why there was 2, but we got people joining. So let's get to it here. For those of you that are hanging on the other one, I'm watching the chat and everyone's kind of like, where is he? What's going on? I apologize, guys. I don't know why it split into 2 there. So you guys need to join the other one. You guys need to come over here where all the cool kids are hanging out. All right, let's get to this here. So looking at the chart here, what I want to talk about is the most recent selling pressure that we saw in Bitcoin. You know, it's crazy what we see in this space. And if you're new to trading, if you're new to just watching markets in general, this will drive you absolutely crazy. If you like the volatility, obviously you won't drive you crazy. You'll enjoy it a little bit more, but it's a wild ride. And just, you know, last week, prices had a tremendous rally up from 9K, and we're breaking through that 12K mark. And of course, going into the weekend, there was that big symmetrical pattern that everyone and their grandma was watching, and we were seeing this, I mean, almost perfectly. It was like textbook the number of times that this thing bounced along this line. And you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and it just never ceases to amaze me how price will just bounce off of these seemingly imaginary lines, these points in time and space here, and just consolidate, and then of course we break bearish on that, and pretty much just kicked off the next leg down, which culminated into the pretty wild selling pressure we saw here this week. And so, you know, how fast things change is what I'm trying to say in this space, right? If you go back to that daily chart, it's not unusual to see this, and it will drive some people crazy if you're not used to it. But, you know, you go from, you know, 9K to 12.3, which is a 35% move, and then you drop, you know, from 12.3 to 9.5, which is a 23% drop, you know, and here we are seeing a pretty decent bounce. And so from a trading perspective, that's good, right? If you're willing to do the work to ride the waves, because, you know, those big moves equal opportunity. You would rather have that than, you know, as a trader, you would rather have that than this, right? Where the moves are just up and down, tiny, not a lot of momentum, not a lot of follow through, right? As a trader, you kind of like to see those moves. But if you're a long-term holder, or if you're buying at the wrong time, it can absolutely be a little bit of frustration, because let's say you bought at 10 or 11K and 4 or 5 days later you're watching price drop down to the 9Ks again. You know, it could be a little stressful from that perspective. And so what a wild ride it's been here in the last few days. So where do we go from here? So what I wanted to point out, it's going back to that 4-hour chart. Yesterday we saw a bullish hammer reversal candle form on that 4-hour chart after getting very oversold. I mean, look at the number of red candles that we saw here on this 4-hour time frame. During this time frame, this period of time here, Binance was in maintenance mode, and there was some other things going on there. You know, we saw the ETFs get delayed again, and there really hasn't been a whole lot of talk on the ETF front in the recent months, surprisingly. And I kind of mentioned that in the last stream, saying, you know, no one's really talking about the ETFs anymore. But, you know, we finally saw a little bit of that come back to the forefront. And so, you know, just with the culmination of that, there was some reaction to delays in the tariffs, and that spiked the Chinese yuan. That kicked off the stock market a little bit, and with that you also saw Bitcoin price fall pretty quickly. So there was just a culmination of events that kind of kicked off some of the selling, which we were already seeing the selling pressure begin after breaking bearish from this little wedge that we had formed. And so here we are forming that bullish reversal candle here on some very high volume after price had hit some pretty extreme lows. I mean, if you look at the RSI and the MACD histograms, I mean, it was a pretty swift fall, and, you know, caught a lot of people by surprise. And it was unusual, right? I mean, we see volatility in this space. We see ups and downs regularly, plus or minus 10%. That's nothing. But this was one of the bigger ones, right? It was a pretty swift fall, and, you know, we went from 12.3 to 9.5 in seemingly no time. Find that bullish reversal candle here yesterday. It showed some follow through to the upside, and what I wanted to see on that, let me zoom in on that. And the thing with these candlestick patterns, right, they're not a magic bullet, they're not a 100% works, anything like that, but they do signify potential reversals, and so you want to pay attention to those. But I gotta caution, when you're looking at candlestick patterns, just like anything else in technical analysis, whether it's a chart pattern or an indicator even, everything else, and same with candlestick patterns, has to be done in context. And what do I mean by it has to be done in context? What I mean by that is, you know, if you see a candlestick pattern, let's say you see this hammer reversal, but it's like, you know, just in the middle of a trading range or something, or it's, you know, up here, you can say, oh, there's a reversal candle, right? It's always in context of what you're seeing in the broader scheme of things. And so a hammer reversal seen at the lows of a broader downtrend, in this case, we were hitting some extreme oversold conditions after falling 23%. That is a significant hammer reversal, especially because the volume was there. And so you definitely want to pay attention to that one, right? If you had seen one like up here, for example, you know, you saw this little wick attempt and all that. Yeah, technically it's a little reversal candle, but it's not as significant, right? It's not a, you know, it's not at the back of a big downtrend. It's just kind of a a long wick tail in the middle of a trading range. And so you want to look at that. And the same with the upside. You know, if you start to be in a long uptrend and you see a reversal signal near the top, whether it's a hanging man candle or a shooting star, dojis, something like that, then those are something you pay attention to, but they're not necessarily 100% always works, all that good stuff. And so just make note of that. But this is the way this one works out here. So you see this hammer reversal, and once you get the candle, there's a line in the sand established, and that's the low of the wick, especially when the high of the candle is taken out, which you see in the following candle. And so now this puts this reversal pattern in play. And generally you expect to see more upside, but you don't want to see price retreat more than halfway through the wick of that candle. And so in this case, puts it right around 9,600, call it. And so I was looking for a little bit of a pullback. I thought it'd be nice to see a retest, but a higher low that does not undercut that 9,700 level, 9,650 at the most, right? And we saw that. We saw that nice bounce right into some moving averages, and we got the big shakeout here earlier today. And look at where the low of that candle hit, right at 97.40 basically. And here we are, a very quick bounce back to the top. So, or it looks like we're getting some of the folks coming back here. Let me post one more on there, on the comments there. It looks like people are coming back here. All right. And so we've seen a quick bounce back, and here we are now testing this resistance. So on the way up, this level now is going to be important here in the near term if you're trading, right? So looking at that 10.4, 10.5 level, which is also right where the moving averages are. The 22 EMA is right there, maybe hard to see. That's the yellow line. And so I'm watching this. Breaking out from that would be nice, because then that would establish like another higher high, and then we could start to turn the trend potentially, right? And so you're beginning to see the early signs of a low being established here. That was a good low, it was a good bounce. I was scaling in yesterday, sold a little into that resistance, still have a position, saw that recovery. Looks like it's time to start scaling back in here again. And again, that's for me, that's more me active trading. Now on the way up here, this is what I'm looking at. This was just an oversold bounce, right? If you go to the daily chart again, the moving averages are still way up here, you know, near 10,800. And so at the time we were way down here at 9s, 10s, you know, even a bounce into that moving average, which would just be that, a bounce into moving average. But even then, that'd be for a pretty nice little bounce trade, right? You're talking 10%. And so that's very nice to see if we can get that high. So that's really the first target that I'm looking at here. The good thing too is the volume was above average on yesterday's daily candle. You saw another wick here today. If this closed, and I know there's a lot of time left on the day, but if it closed the way it is now, this would be very bullish, since today's close would be higher than yesterday's. But ideally you want to see those wicks taken out, and so that's why I have that line on the chart drawn around that 10.48 or so price level. But next target is about upper 10s, 10.8 is what I'm looking at. It could go a little bit higher, as high as 11K, but after that, it's going to be anyone's guess. Do we just see a little bit of a bear flag bounce? Do we go from here to 10, 8, maybe 11, and then start to retreat? That's going to be the big question, right? Yesterday, I was talking to, posting on the Slack group yesterday saying that if price continued lower, I was expecting a bounce, but if that bullish reversal hammer did not hold up and price broke lower, I would be getting out of the way quick, because I don't expect this low to hold if it's retested again. And so if price takes out this wick here at the mid 9,700, 9,500s, it's going to probably be a pretty quick move right back to 9K. And at that point, I'm not so sure it holds this time, just because the big picture would really start to establish a pattern of, lower lows, lower lows, lower lows. If we get another lower highs, lower high, lower high, lower high. If we get another lower high, this is going to start to look like a big descending wedge here. And, generally speaking, resistance starts to get tested, or support starts to get tested at that point. And so kind of going into Q4, it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. It does not surprise me to see the wild, choppy action we've seen here over the last couple of months, considering we had a tremendous Q2. We had pretty boring Q1. It was kind of flat, but things really kicked off in April, and we went from 4K to almost 14K very quickly. And so seeing this consolidation, this choppy price action is not surprising at all. It's just the nature of markets. That you don't go straight up forever, don't go straight down forever. There's going to be periods of pause and consolidation along the way, and that's what we're seeing right now. And so weekly chart, looking at the weekly chart, if you're taking a big step back and looking at the broader picture, you can say that the uptrend is still very much in place. Yes, it's been very choppy up here. Yes, maybe that's some distribution, but in the big picture, this is kind of just normal consolidation after a very strong multi-month rally, and the weekly chart still has not closed below the 10 EMA. There was a little bit of a red here that almost did, but didn't, got back up. Again, there's been wicks below that, but the moving average pair is still holding up. You got the 10 above the 22, and until that changes, the big picture trend is still in play. And so from a long-term perspective, I think the charts are okay from that perspective, from the long term. So that's it for the Bitcoin chart. Let me think if there's anything else I want to cover here on this angle before we move on. We covered upside, downside targets here. Of course, if we continue higher and break out, I'm not expecting this to happen this week or maybe even next week, but if prices just continue to consolidate, there's some big lines in the sand being drawn here. Obviously the 9K level, and then now that that upper 12, that low 12K range here. So we're kind of in this big range, and it could be choppy here for the next couple of weeks, maybe within this range, as long as 9K holds up. And so that's something I'd be watching. But if we break out of 12 and begin to hold above it, I think things look really good. These prior highs here probably wouldn't be much resistance at that point. If price starts to trade, up here in the upper 12 area, I think we'd blast right through and make new relative highs, new yearly highs. So those are the big picture views from my perspective. One interesting point that I want to point out here, and again, this is not trading advice or financial advice or anything like that, but I've been testing this BMI based trading strategy here over the last couple of months and back testing this, and it's actually worked out pretty nicely here. There's obviously there's going to be some whipsaw and some in and out, but we saw the confirmed buy signal issued down here on August 1st after that reversal. Now I was already in because 9,700 was the level that I was watching on the shorter time frame, so we got in right there. But it was nice to see that the next day the buy signal was confirmed by this indicator, this trading strategy that I'm using, and of course that led to a very nice rally into 12K, the symmetrical pattern. And then when the symmetrical pattern broke down, the indicator, that was the first sell signal, right? So it didn't issue a sell signal here, it didn't issue one here, but it did after that indicator broke down. So you had about a day of bounce action to get out of the way, and it was a sell signal. And it was kind of interesting because I pointed out to the group saying, longer term the daily chart looks fine, but kind of interesting to see that the indicator said sell, or not sell, but take profit, right? It's not the same as a sell signal. A sell signal is like a short sell signal. Like what you saw back here, right? That's a short, but this was a kind of a take profit type of signal, and so I said take profit basically at 11.3, 11.4, and it's interesting to see that it avoided this entire downfall. So something I'm working on here. I'm going to keep testing it out, seeing how it plays out, but eventually my hope is that these type of signals will be kind of broadcasted out some way, some sort of automated way to the node insiders. And so that's what I'm going to be working on. And then I've got different ones that I'm working on too. This is a longer time frame one. This is a daily chart one. So it's more for like swing trades, obviously. But there's another one that I'm looking at for alts, which is more 4-hour based. And so we'll go from there. All right, so that's it for the BTC chart here. Let's take a look at some of the other stuff here. Bakkt, yeah, that's in the news here today. So Bakkt announces the platform launch here. They got basically clearing to do that. We know that this has been in the work for a long time, and we've been talking Bakkt since last year. And coming into this year, everybody thought it would have been done already, right? Remember last year it was supposed to be October, and it just kept being delayed. But here they are finally getting some sort of clearance from the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission here in the United States. And so it'll be interesting to see. Now, what's important about Bakkt is this is a futures contract that settles in physical Bitcoin, right? Unlike most other futures contracts, right? If you even look at things like gold and silver, right? Most of those will generally settle in cash, and it's bullish from the sense that people can take delivery of these futures if they choose to, and they would have to receive Bitcoin, right? And so that's bullish in the sense that it could potentially drive more buying pressure in Bitcoin if people are settling and taking delivery, right? It's just a simple supply-demand fundamentals thing, but good to see that. So we'll be see. I mean, I don't know. Personally, like when it comes to this whole futures and exchanges and institutional driven demand and blah blah blah, I know that generally speaking in the crypto space, people applaud that. It's kind of a bullish thing, and Bitcoin is becoming a significant asset, and it's proven itself, and it's going mainstream. And I'm just not so enthusiastic personally. I'm not so bullish. I mean, this is just another tool for Wall Street and hedge funds and banks to enter the Bitcoin space, and they're already in it. They're coming in more. Like, okay, it might drive things up, whatever, but it's also a double-edged sword. Now you can short it, now you can do other things, and so whatever. I mean, I'm of the opinion that Bitcoin is already mainstream personally. Like, it's already hit that. I mean, it's a household word. Anybody, any serious entity on Wall Street has been trading crypto for some time now. I talk to guys that work at prop trading desks and all that. I mean, they've been trading crypto since 2017. So it's not like, oh, Wall Street's coming to join the party. I mean, they've been here for a long time, right? Like, it is what it is. So, but anyway, not to poo-poo on the parade. I mean, I know it's a big development, and it's just going to show you the maturity of the space and the maturity of Bitcoin trading and crypto, and we need it. Let's be honest. I mean, we need it, right? If you look at some of the exchanges and the hacks and the silliness that goes on some of the bigger exchanges, the manipulation, all that. I mean, it's just very obscure right now. But it's, like I said, it's a double-edged sword because, with security and all that stuff comes transparency, and, there is no anonymity at that point. There is no, I can just set up an account with an email address. It's just like any other traditional trading account or brokerage. And some people appreciate that, some people don't, but, it is what it is. So, all right, let's go look at that. So that was the news. I'm not going to cover any other news items. There's a lot of news going on. We saw the ETFs. We saw the Ripple investigations and blah, blah, blah. But let's go. All right. Let's take a look at, so what I want to cover real quick is, before we move into some of the charts that you guys want to look at, just some of the broader markets, right? So if we look at, I'm just going to very quickly hit some of the big things just to kind of point something out, right? You look at price of gold. I mean, gold has been on a tear. It broke out of a multi-year base, right? I've been watching this one here for quite some time. This huge multi-year base finally breaks out, shoots straight up. Now, my target, by the way, was 1550 roughly, going into that 1550. And we're seeing price kind of go into that. I think we'll see some consolidation after that. But just putting that aside, right? I mean, a big breakout in gold. You look at some of the price action with Bitcoin versus the Chinese yuan. Yeah, they were briefly linked for a very short period of time. But if you go back to this chart here, and if you add the Chinese yuan, let me add that real quick here. Right, you can see there was some correlation. The price went up here on August 1st. And this was going up, and people were saying, hey, the yuan dropped, this one drops, and hey, it's bouncing, Bitcoin's bouncing. And of course, on Monday, there was announcements of, some delays, some postponement in tariffs on a handful of products here. And of course, the yuan spiked. This is the US dollar versus the yuan, so that's why it dropped, because it's the dollar pair. But the yuan spiked versus the dollar, and it's been bouncing back. But, Bitcoin fell along with it, and has been bouncing back a little bit. So there's still a little bit of correlation. It'd be interesting to see if if this thing takes another leg down, does that translate into Bitcoin taking another leg down? Now, me personally, I'm not putting a whole lot of weight into this because, this correlation has only, lasted a few days, is a week old, and I don't expect it to last forever. I think it'll decouple, but it was just interesting to see that kind of playing out for a while. And, there's just a lot of movement on the plate, if you will. You look at the euro and you look at some of these other currencies, for those of you that trade them. I mean, it's been wild for the last, month or two. And, even looking at the stock market, if you go to the S&P or the Dow, and, this is the U.S. stock market, right? We had this massive rally off the lows here, and then August has just been turbulence, a lot of movement, a lot of big ups and downs. Yeah, some of it is political, it's trade wars, it's all that good stuff, but it just kind of raises the question, right? Is there something bigger brewing underneath the surface? Is there, and I don't want to be over dramatic, right? Because we're way far from anything resembling a financial crisis. But, is people are saying, right? I mean, we're due. We haven't had a recession in a long time. It's kind of peak economy. Unemployment's at all-time lows, and housing prices are at their highs. Stock market was at the highs recently. It just kind of debt's crazy. Countries are taking on debt. There's negative yields. And it just, people are asking, like, is there something going on underneath the surface? Is this whole trade war going to throw the economies into recession? And what does that all mean for Bitcoin if there is a trade war, right? And so now personally, if there's a currency crisis, and what by that I mean, major economies, the Chinese, the euro, other things like that, start to see huge fluctuations, massive drops in their currencies versus the dollar or versus gold. Let's just be clear. That is not good for anybody, right? People, it kind of reminds me of the gold bugs, right? Where the gold bugs, and I used to be very involved in the gold and silver markets, but it was like the gold bugs were just praying for, the collapse for the economy, so that because their gold was going to be worth $10,000 an ounce and silver was going to go to $200. And let's just be clear, like, I see that as insurance, right? Like, insurance is something you buy, but you hope you never have to use. Life is just so much better when it's going well and you don't need your insurance. And it's the same thing with, like, having, the safe assets. Like, yeah, you have them there as just as an in case, but nobody in their right mind wants a financial crisis or a currency crisis or anything. Yeah, you got to be smart. Yeah, you got to be prepared. What if it does happen? Maybe you don't have all your money in one bank or in one account or in even one country, but ideally, you should always be hoping that you probably won't need it. You're just being over precautious, right? And that's the thing, right? With Bitcoin, if there is a crisis, I think Bitcoin will hugely benefit, but I also expect that governments around the world are going to fight it. And we saw that already this week with, some of the Spanish banks banning UK customers from using Coinbase, and, they're not allowing them to transfer fiat into the Coinbase account. And everyone's going to be protecting themselves, right? So if you see the euro tanking, or if you see some of the other countries just dropping quickly, I expect that they're going to start to put some measures in place where they're just going to not allow you to deposit into certain exchanges. They're going to be stricter on tracking crypto and collecting their taxes and all that good stuff, right? And that's that's what I expect is if you see it there. Oh, it was FUD. Okay, good. But you've seen it before. I mean, we saw it here in the United States before, when in 2017 and 2018, right? There was certain banks that were not letting customers transfer into Coinbase. And obviously, they weren't letting them use credit cards to buy Bitcoin and other stuff like that. But I expect you'll see more of that as some of this, if some of that plays out, right? That's always the big if, right? We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, look at the dollar index. It's still moving higher. It's a strong dollar scenario, but surprisingly, gold is going up along with the dollar, which is generally unusual. They tend to work inverse. And so, interesting times. I think we're due for a recession, personally. I mean, it's just been overdue. The market's hot. The economies are hot. Like, at some point, growth has to pause. unless you just have massive inflation or something. I think we're certainly overdue. Housing is starting to get out of the reach of a lot of people in terms of affordability. There's just crazy, massive overbuilding being done right now in terms of commercial real estate, in terms of the number of properties being built, and it's just like a massive boom is going on. Eventually, it's going to pause. Eventually, there'll be oversupply, and markets just correct themselves. And it's interesting to see that the U.S. Federal Reserve lowered interest rates for the first time in a long time. And generally, that tends to mark a little bit of a turning point in the economies as well after a large expansionary period. And so, we're due. Is it going to be another 2008, 2009 financial crisis? No, I hope not. But we're certainly due for a pause. We'll see what happens, right? One day at a time, my friends. All right, so let's take a look at some charts. What do you guys want to look at here? I'm going to look at the alert system, see if there's anything popping up here. And then we'll look at some charts. And then we'll call it good. Now, I'm keeping an eye on the other charts on the side here, by the way. I'm watching, I've got a couple of open trades on the stock market side of things. One of them being on AMD. And so if I have to, take a break, pause real quick, we'll see what happens. I might have to close this position out here, but it seems to be bouncing back here a little bit. So just a heads up that I am watching through the corner of my eye. So if I just suddenly stop talking, I'm doing something over there. All right. NVIDIA was moving today. There's some other things going on here. So, all right. So back to the Bitcoin charts here. Let's see here. QSP, okay, there's a chart I haven't looked at in a long time. I'm going to just start making a list here. I'm going to cover the biggies, of course. So if you just joined us, the only thing we've looked at is Bitcoin. I've ranted a little bit about economies and charts and stuff, but we haven't looked at any of the other names at this point. So I will certainly cover the big cap names as usual. So we'll start with XRP. I'll talk ETH. BCH was having a surprisingly strong couple of days before the carnage, but we'll take a look at that guy here. Litecoin, the party's over. Did you guys see that that tweet with Charlie and Litecoin not getting any dev support and no one's working on the project and it's just him? That was interesting. Let's see here. And you guys make a point on the alts. I mean, it's been brutal out there, and so I can understand the lack of let's go check out these alts because it has been absolutely brutal in altcoin land. There's been some exceptions, but if you look at the bigger picture chart, still no reprieve. There's absolutely been some exceptions, but it's just been mostly a brutal pullback for the alts, especially the BTC pairs. I mean, I'm looking at the USD pairs here, and they're all rolling over. If you look at the BTC pairs on the alts, there's been no place to hide, right? If you look at names like Cardano, names like EOS, even ETH, and of course the almighty Ripple, XRP. I mean, it's just been a bloodbath out there, to say it bluntly there. So we'll take a look at some of those here. All right. So I'm going to start with the USD pairs. Let me put some other names on my list here. Link, Dusk. So I've got XRP, ETH, BCH, Litecoin, Link, Dusk, QSP, Cardano, EOS. All right. And we'll go from there. So I'm going to see what's on the list here. We've got Monero, 0x, NEM, QuantStamp, BAT, a bunch of smaller names, Data, Aggie. All right, we'll see if those are worth looking at later here. All right, let's start with the biggie. So looking at XRP, I'm going to go with the BTC pair, of course. No surprise what's going on there. We got the big sell-off here. This is the daily chart of XRP. Just continues to make new lows versus Bitcoin. Where is the bottom? There's no end in sight just yet. I mean, it's oversold. It's been oversold for a long time. If you look at the weekly chart, RSI on the weekly chart has been sub 25, sub 30 for several weeks now, but still no end in sight for the selling pressure. Dialing it in here, looking at the 4-hour chart, we saw the big sell-off when Bitcoin sold off. A lot of things sold off. XRP had some added news around some potential investigation. This was a massive spike. I mean, this single 4-hour candle, you saw the price versus Bitcoin drop 15% here. Bounce back a little bit, but you can see the bounce is mostly just landing into these moving averages and just pulling back from there. So no reprieve as of yet. If we look at it from the USD side here, I'm going to just stick with Binance here. Going to that daily chart here, XRP dollar breaking some support here recently. So there was a little bit of a low being established in and around this range here, and that was, what is that, 30 cents basically, 29 cents. And here this week, we saw this kind of just drop in. You can see it wasn't, it didn't have any follow through. Yeah, it was finding some support, but there's just been no follow through. All of these have just been bounces, lower highs, and we hit right here. This was really the last little hoorah, and of course breaks right through support, slices right through, very quickly drops, and now it's living below this level. Until it can get back above it, you got to remain in favor of the sellers. There's just no buying support showing up as of yet. And people are talking about this is a significant level because if it loses 25 cents in the big picture, let me go to the big picture here, you can see a big drop here. I'm going to go to XRP dollar on Bitfinex. It's got a little bit more history there, but you can see this was a long time level, right, on the USD side of things, that it's kind of crossing on the other side of this line. Not good from any perspective. It's just a major support level being broken, and it looks like it's slicing through. If it quickly recovers, this is the weekly chart, by the way, if it just quickly bounces right back up and holds up over the line, then maybe it was a little bit of a shakeout. But right now, I would be leaning in favor of the sellers. So no bueno. All right. Looking at the Ethereum side of things here, ETH dollar, ETH USD, where are we trading at? 185. Was unable to clear resistance here. Was looking pretty good here, like you're wanting to get going. Maybe had found a low. Just that 235 level proved to be the wall, and then quickly rolled over, along with the price of Bitcoin, of course. Bitcoin rolled over and drove a lot of these lower from the dollar perspective. And on the BTC pair, this one has already broken some big support. But if we look at the dollar pair here, the last big breakout that we saw, after the April consolidation, right, going into May, was right around that 180 level. And so that's where price is trading right now. So it's going to be interesting to see if that shows up to be any sort of level of support right now. And we're seeing that price trade in and around there. Below that, then you're looking at the 150s as your next stop. And so things are looking interesting here for ETH. Now, ETH BTC, I still keep an eye on it, because if some of these alts are going to start to show some life, you'll start to see it show up in names like ETH BTC and some of the majors. There was some signs of hope earlier this week. It was a little bit of a bounce, and then of course it just kind of rolled over, no follow through to the upside. So ETH BTC, just still very much in a downtrend. And what I would look for here, right? It's always tempting to say, oh, you see the first green candle off the low. And a percentage-wise, they're pretty big, right? You get a 7% move, 8% move off the low. You think that's it, that's the low. Look at the volumes coming in. But what I would suggest, right, is look for some of these other indicator type things, right? So like I use moving average pairs, for example, as one way to do it. And you can see here that the 10 EMA has been trading below the 22 EMA since crossing bearish here in the middle of June, after price was going sideways. Now this was the first shot of, hey, maybe this is a low. It paused. The 10 EMA went right back over. Things were consolidating. This would have been a great time to start looking at potentially breaking out. Obviously it didn't. It rolled over, and price has just been trading this way for quite some time. It's very oversold, but there's no signal in terms of a bottom is in or low is in. Ideally you're going to see some sort of consolidation near the lows, and then price will start to turn around. But you don't have to necessarily catch the exact low or chase the first green candle off the bottom. Maybe you could scale in if you're a little bit more aggressive, but I'm just saying, patience, right? Eventually the bottom will be in, it'll be clear, And you know, and I'm not worried about I got to catch the exact low or anything like that. So you want to just be in when things are a little bit more in your favor, the momentum's in the direction you're looking for, the winds to your back. Now, if you've been going short, hey, then this has been all good, right? If you're trading on the short side. So BCH. We're looking at BCH dollar here. Now, this one was interesting because I was watching, let's go to the Coinbase exchange here. I was watching this little setup here on the dollar pair, and it had a pretty good little rally versus Bitcoin, but that 350 mark was just kind of the level to be keeping an eye on the BCH pair. This is BCH dollar. $350 was kind of that resistance. You can see it tested it a few times. It looked like it wanted to get going, and then just boom, quick sell-off. This wick was pretty big here on Coinbase. I mean, it literally went from 350s down to 260s very quickly. Percentage-wise, that's a big move, right? But it did slice below the line here, that lower trend line that I was watching. It's now trading below that, and so definitely bearish. I was actually bearish on this one earlier. I was too early because I was watching it here, and I was thinking we were seeing a bear flag break a couple of days back, right? I was looking at that going, this is a bear flag bounce. It's rolling over. Of course, it went right back to the highs, tested it, and then it rolled over. But I was looking at the bearish side for the BCH there. BCH, BTC, maybe trying to find a low, maybe. It's been in choppy range here. You're getting a couple little bit of a double bottom here. I'd be looking to see if it can finally start trading above, what is that, 336 or so on the upside. So that's what I'll be watching on BCH. Litecoin. All right, looking at the LTC here. Looking at Litecoin, ever since the halvening, post-halvening, not a whole lot going on. And we know price had already been pulling back since, before that, once Bitcoin topped and went choppy. I thought maybe we'd get one more little hoorah going into the halvening. Nothing happened. There was this little blip, and then it just kind of rolled over since then. Retesting these most recent lows, I mean, was almost $70 here yesterday. And, big picture, though, the chart's just not bullish right now. I mean, it looks weak. It looks like it wants to break these lows. We'll see. I mean, this is a major support level right now. The last time price was down here was, back in May. So breaking below that, your next big support is basically $60. That was the big breakout. And then after that, man, who knows? Maybe $50. I don't know if we'll see it that low, but hey, anything can happen, right? It was $25 not that long ago before going to 140. Oh, Litecoin. What do you guys think about Litecoin? Interesting story on Litecoin. When I got into crypto, Litecoin was the first crypto I ever owned. Litecoin. So I got a special place in my heart for Litecoin. and in fact, I got into crypto when it was more from a technical thing. I was interested in it, so I started mining Litecoin, and that's how I actually got my first Litecoin. So Litecoin was the first crypto I owned, and I never purchased it. And it was, man, I don't know, $4 a Litecoin, $5 a Litecoin at the time. And so it was just kind of an interesting thing. And eventually, I started buying Bitcoin and ETH and other things, but yeah, it was kind of one of those first projects that I started to follow early on in the space. I'm not a perma bull by any means on Litecoin, and in fact, I probably don't follow the project as much as I used to. But it's just an interesting story that, back in the day, Litecoin, and this was back when, I remember depositing some Litecoin on Bittrex and Polo and trading it for some other stuff. And oh, those were the days. You know what? The first, I think one of the first trades I made was a Litecoin, sold it for Bitcoin, and then I bought some Steam. Some Steam. And that's when Steam was kind of first hitting the scene. And what's going to be the next big thing? Oh, man. So, yeah, so looking at the Litecoin price here. Litecoin BTC. Is this a falling wedge? Let me see it. Not on the daily chart. Not on the daily chart. It's it's just a downtrend. I mean, the falling wedge, you want to see it, the high is not so steep. Let me see. I mean, yeah, I guess you could argue for that. I could see why you say that. I'd be looking at more of the parallel channel personally. So by that I mean, you know, I'm more looking at it from this side of things. All right. And so I'd be looking at maybe we see a test of the lower bound here, right? Which would, you know, it's right at support here on the BTC pair. You don't want to see it get much below that. So yeah, I mean, I guess you can look at it both ways. Either way, parallel, falling wedge, whichever way you're looking at it, the significant thing to look at is the trend line, right? The upper trend line. If you start to see price break above, that'd be positive. Ideally, you see a little bit of a pullback into the support zone, and then test the next resistance level, which would be, you know, this little zone back here that it failed to get above. So that's how I set my targets when I'm trading like falling wedges or bounce trades or something like that. You always look left and you say, where was the next big resistance level? And so if you're trading on a bounce trade, you know, that's one way to do it. And then what I tend to do is I line up like a fib level or something and see if there's anything that correlates. And so let's say this was the low. I'm not saying it is, but let's say that was the low. Then, you know, I'd look at, on a bounce, it could run as high as the 382 or the 50% or something. And then when you see the fib levels just magically correlate perfectly with some of those resistance levels, it really, you know, it really adds that much more value to them. So it's generally how I'll assess my targets on the way up on the bounce trades. Bounce trades are just so much different, you know, than when you're trading this, right? When you're trading these breakout trades, the strong upward momentum, this is just so much more fun, a lot more momentum. This you hold a little bit longer, right? When you're counter trend trading and you're looking for a bounce, it's generally a quick trade. You get out of the way into strength and you kind of book your gains, right? That's just generally the way I'll do it. All right, what's next on the list? Link. Looking at Link. Link has been, you know, somewhat resilient compared to most of the other names that we've seen here. Now, it did have a pretty good pullback here in recent months. Found a local low here most recently on the 10th. A little bit of a bounce. We're seeing some follow through on that here. Several green days in a row versus Bitcoin. Today's kind of the first red day as Bitcoin is bouncing, surprisingly. But if you go to the 4-hour charts, you know, this has been a little bit of a stronger name here as of late. If we look at Link Dollar, Link USD, this is on Coinbase. Here, let me go to Link Dollar on Tether. So I'm going to go Binance here. A little bit more history. There we go. You know, again, this one did break that downtrend, that uptrend. It's been in a downtrend since. This one looks a little bit more interesting here. To me, it feels more vulnerable, but it is finding some support. If you look left, there was this breakout point back here, and you can see that on the dollar pair, price has so far been holding above that point. On this pullback, it bounced off of it here, bounced off of it here, but it also has lacked to show any meaningful upside momentum. And so it's just now kind of range bound, you know, in this, what is this? 205 to 260, 265, you know, in and around that range. You know, it's just kind of range bound here at this point. So that's really the range to be watching. Now, this means two things, right? One, obviously, the support has become stronger and stronger. So buying at the low end of the range tends to be a good low risk entry point because you got a clear stop, right? Your stop is just below the range. If it breaks it, just get out of the way generally. But, you know, you can buy at the lows in hope that it finally breaks the upside. But that's a little bit more anticipatory, right? You're not necessarily getting confirmation at that point. The alternative is, you know, you just don't do nothing with it until it actually breaks. And then ideally you look for a pullback entry and then you take the next leg higher, right? And so there's a couple of ways to do that. What you don't want to see, of course, is a break below that support because the move is generally pretty quick. When it breaks a long time support from a trading range like this, turns into distribution and you get a big spike down, at that point you could very quickly see $1.60 on Link if it breaks this support. So, you know, it's kind of a could go either way scenario. There's certainly, you know, arguments to be made for both cases, but I'd be cautious here. If it does break that low, it's going to probably move down pretty quick. Any good books you've read recently? I've not read any trading books here in the last month. I usually do a pretty good job of kind of reading a new trading book, or I've rehashed a couple of old ones, oldie but goodies. But what's the latest book I read? There was two books that I read recently, and they have nothing to do with trading, and you guys will probably think I'm a total nerd for telling you this. But the first one was a biography, Kevin Mitnick's, called Ghost in the Wires. Pretty interesting. You know, he was a hacker in the 90s and the 80s, early 90s, mostly hacking phone companies and stuff like that. I thought that was, it was a pretty interesting read there. And the other one was Atomic Habits. A little bit more of a personal development book, but if you're into that kind of stuff, Atomic Habits is a really good book. And if you're a trader, and that's mostly why I read it, more from the trading psychology type of things, there's a lot you can really take out of Atomic Habits in terms of implementing, improvements and all that good stuff. So James Clear is the author of Atomic Habits. So those are really the last two that I've read here recently. No new trading books per se. All right, that was a nice little quick aside there. Let's go to Dusk. Now, admittedly, I have done no research on Dusk or anything like that. So it's been a nice little move. I've obviously been keeping an eye on it and watching the charts here just because it's been a nice mover here as of late. It's been very volatile, though. You get these quick spikes up, quick spikes down. I mean, up 50%, right? Down 30%. And it looks like, okay, the low is in. It goes up 40%. Then a single day drops 20%. And so, good luck. But it certainly has been a big one here as of late. Dusk dollar, or tether, if you will. All right. The trend is your friend. It is in a little bit of a consolidation mode here. We'll see where this one breaks out. That's a nice classic symmetrical pattern there starting to form. We'll see which way it breaks out, one way or the other. It's had a good run already, though. Just keep in mind when you start to get those names that run up 100, 200% in a very short period of time, eventually there's that quick sell-off, profit taking. But for now, the trend is your friend, still moving higher. These pullbacks into the moving averages so far have proven to be a good place to look at that one. What was the other ones here? Cardano. Can't forget about Cardano. My music just stopped here. I guess. All right, one sec here. So Cardano was watching this, potentially forming a double bottom, and it had a chance to play out. And then here in the last couple of days, that's been invalidated now. What was looking positive about Cardano here this is the dollar pair, right? So if you look at left, this was, and I'm looking at basically the 50 cent or the 0.05 cent mark. The 5 cent mark here, there was resistance, finally broke out here early this year, had a nice run, obviously topped out, pulled right back. We saw this low point hold here in the middle of July, rallied, still not bullish by any means, hit moving averages, starting to pull back, and then we saw the break below that. So this was a big shakeout, but the following day, it made a very nice reversal on much higher volume, cleared, and basically almost was a bullish engulfing. It really wasn't. It should have closed a little bit higher, but it cleared the entire range. There was a wick here, and then the following day followed through. And so at that point, I was thinking, this is looking a lot more positive. It's probably got a good chance of being a double bottom. That was a quick reversal. And then that was the end of the move. It just couldn't get above these moving averages, stayed below them. They were obviously still trading inverted, and then we saw price break and make a new low. And so that potential double bottom has now clearly been invalidated. The trend remains in place. The downward pressure remains in place here. That started since topping here recently. So it's making a new low. And at this point, until it can break above these moving averages, which right now would be getting back above, 0.055, then I would just be very cautious with it. It was showing some life last week. Looking at it from the BTC side of things, again, looking like it wanted to find a low. It had a nice solid green candle on above average volume, pulled back, held the breakout point, looking like wanted to go. It just couldn't break above that moving average. And here, breaking below that level I was watching. If we go to the 4-hour chart here, this, sorry about moving around so much there. This breakout point here, rallied, pulled back, tested. This was the leg to get going. If it was going to get going, this is where it needed to do it right here. And it just, it had a little move, but it wasn't much. It rolled over, and now it's obviously breaking below this level now. So for now, like most alts, there's just not a lot out there that looks very positive. I mean, they're oversold, they're overdue for a bounce, but right now there's just not a lot out there that looks better than Bitcoin, honestly. I mean, there's a few, we've seen a few, but not a whole lot. BTC. Yep, nice to see it finally breaking above that level that I was watching here, this 10.4-ish, 10.45. So, good. That little hammer reversal bottom's playing out so far. We'll see. We will see. All right, let's do a few more, guys, and then we will wrap it up. We'll call it a weekend, call it a stream. I'm not looking to short Bitcoin just yet. And there obviously have been good short trades. It's mostly been long and then take profit, and then long and take profit. I'm looking at the longer term chart when I make that choice. Obviously, we're in a pullback mode, but longer term charts are still in a bit of a, within a broader uptrend. And so the better trade right now, at least, has been trade with the trend. Now, this has been choppy, but the better trade has been look for places to buy for the long side. If you're doing shorter term trades, if you're looking at 1-hour charts or something like that, yeah, plenty of great short side trades. But for me, I'm just kind of looking more at the broader trend and just sticking to the long sides. Now that will change if it starts to lose 99K or so, because then some of my other indicators that I watch will trigger bearish mode, and at that point, bounces will be shortable, and we'll go from there. So right now, the answer is no. Not that I have anything against shorting Bitcoin. Do I see Chainlink going under $2? Yeah, I pointed out that support level. I'm not saying it will, but it's a very clear support level that if it breaks, I think will be a swift drop. And at that point, it'll take it under $2 pretty quick. But it's it's tradable right now. Buying into that support looks pretty good, and you got a pretty tight stop if it holds. EOS, man, EOS. Let's go to EOS dollar, because man, what a fall it has been. EOS dollar, went as high as 850 here in June, trading at 360. A lot of these names, notice, are retesting. Some of them are breaking below, but a lot of these names are retesting, that July 15th low. We're seeing some of that. Be interesting to see if that turns out to be a good low. But for most of these, what I'm going to do is, until it breaks above some of this recent range, I'm just going to stay cautious and not really try to catch the bottom, if you will, until we start to see more names showing a positive action versus Bitcoin. Right now, it's just kind of 1 and 2 here and there. TRX. Eesh. That was a pretty wild action here we saw, but it's pretty much been in pullback mode since then. 0x was on the list here for some reason. It's popping here recently. I don't know why. I didn't do any research on it, but it saw a little bit of a spike here today, yesterday. What were some of the other names that were popping on the list here? Monero, 0x, Nem. Jeez, Nem. There's a name from yesteryear. Nem, yeah. Yeah. It's just not one I like to trade for some reason. Monero. And, this brings up a good point, because some of the guys on the Slack group were talking about this, and it's totally true. You look at names like Nem,
and you look at names, you know, do I dare mention Golem and Siacoin? And you look at names like that, and then even, you know, last year, right, some of the popular names, right, and EOS and some of those others. And then, you know, this year, right, it's the new crop, right? You've got the Maddox of the world popping, and Dusk and Atom, and, you know, just some other stuff like that. And it just goes to show you that, you know, we're just so early on in this space that it's kind of like flavor of the year or flavor of the month type of scenarios, right? I mean, obviously Link has been a strong name this year and has been one of the stronger ones. Was the first to bottom out last year, just made new all-time highs. I mean, amazing stuff, right? But it's always rotating is what I'm saying, right? It's very easy to get caught up with a project and say, oh man, this is the next big thing. This is the one that's going to be, you know, the next Ethereum and all that good stuff. And one may be, but it's just so easy to get caught up. Eventually they kind of run their course and then they just kind of pull back. Not saying that they are dead, but so often it's just really hard. Once a project's had multiple runs, it's really hard for them to kind of come back and test those old highs. What tends to happen is you kind of get the, you know, the big flat line, and they end up trading in a low volume range for a long time after that. And so it's just very early on right now. Some of these projects, as we know, are not going to last. Here's QSP. Wow. Quantstamp. Remember when this one was being pumped by a name, a group, pump group name, which I will not name. It's amazing how they pump these coins, and then of course it always makes me laugh when they say buy up to X price, stop loss none. It's like, good luck if you're paying people thousands of dollars for that kind of advice. Good luck. Oh my lord. And you know, the thing with QSP is, I used to trade this in 2018. It was a good trade, but the volumes are just so low. If you look at a lot of the names on Binance and stuff like that, the trading volumes are tremendously low. It just makes it tough to trade. There's no liquidity there. There's no order flow. You know, and yeah, you might get the spikes from a percentage move, but there's just no trading volume, which just really makes it tough. All right. Well, let's do one more look at the BTC here before we wrap it up. Thank you guys for being here. For those of you, I apologize on the confusion with the live stream link. I can understand if you hate me. I can understand if you want to unsubscribe. My apologies. I don't know what happened. Sorry. All right. Let's see here. So looking at the BTC chart, we looked at the 4-hour chart here first, looking at that big reversal hammer candle that formed a few days back. Nice bounce. We had the retest of that here early today, and very quickly bouncing back from that, which is nice. Finally breaking above some resistance that I was watching here in the very near term around that 10.4 level. And next target's up. I'm using the daily chart as my guide for that. But I would be watching is the 10.8 level up to around this resistance point here. So let's go to the daily chart here real quick. And what I'm using on the daily chart as my first target on the bounce is the moving averages. And so kind of going into this zone right here, which is 10.8, you know, up to the psychological round number 11K, and then you've got a pretty clear wall of resistance right around 11.2. And so, you know, it's a big range, you know, no doubt, but it's nice to see this bounce kind of go up to there. What I'd like to see is the bounce go up to there, pull back maybe into the weekend, and then next week break higher. Now, looking at the bearish case, you'll get a bounce up to there, and then next week it'll break lower, and the level to be watching is, you know, personally for me, if it undercuts this wick from, when was that, Monday, Tuesday, or 2 days ago, sorry. If it undercuts that wick, which is basically 94.50 or so, then I'm not so optimistic that these lows down here will hold. And so at that point, you could be looking at sub 9K Bitcoin, right? It'll finally close that gap everyone's talking about, the futures gap at 8,800. But that's the bear case, that's the bull case. And of course, the alternative scenario, which is probably the most likely, is chop and flop for another couple of months until we get into the fourth quarter, and then maybe we see some more momentum kick in. So those are my thoughts on the BTC. Thank you guys for being here. As always, I appreciate it. I know a lot of you guys have been with me for years now, and love you guys. I always appreciate the comments. I appreciate the interaction, the chat room, and the dialogue, and all that good stuff. And if you're new here, I hope you learned a little something here today, and we'll see where these markets go for now. Thanks for being here, guys. Till next time, take care, everyone.